Hey, welcome to the Latest.com show. I'm Igor Darich. Joining us from Canada, he's a contributor at Issue Hawk and a staff writer at Latest.com. From Toronto, Eric Carrier. And he's a military vet who's fucking hilarious. And Latest.com senior political analyst from Pittsburgh, Josh Patton. And he's a 24-year veteran of the U.S. State Department, the author of We Meant Well from New York, Peter Van Buren. All right, we have a lot to get to. Iowa debates, Trump. But first, late last night, we had a big development in the Oregon Fort Asshole story. The Bundy brothers, Ryan and Ammon, and at least 5 others were arrested after the FBI and Oregon State Police intercepted them en route to a meeting. Lavoy Finicum, the group's spokesperson, was killed after he would apparently try to charge at police while he was armed. And even though, despite all the arrests, the standoff isn't over, there's a number of militants still at the wildlife refuge live streaming themselves on YouTube right now, saying they're not going down without a fight and are preparing for an FBI raid. So, Josh, are you surprised at this FBI operation where, very little was done for 25 days, ended in bloodshed, and didn't end? This altercation ended in bloodshed, and do you foresee more bloodshed?
Well, I think that the FBI, what they did was really rather smart in that they sort of left them alone so that they could, feel comfortable traveling back and forth from the compound to wherever. And then they were able to arrest the militia piecemeal as opposed to, a one big raid. And no, I'm not surprised that one of them.
Okay, well, we lost Joshua. Peter, are you surprised that we were all descending into bloodshed so quickly after the FBI pretty much stood down the entire time?
Yeah, well, we all do miss Josh, and I think this is just a symbol of how the reach of these militias at this point in time. But anyway, rest in peace, old friend. The thing with them, a sane person would say that the FBI is in fact pursuing a very thought out, rational policy. I'm not that person. I mean, I'm at the point where I want to see a drone strike on this place. You just turn it around, and the whole thing is really absurd. Put a bunch of Muslim guys in there with AKs and turbans instead of this, double extra large camo crew. And we'd be going insane. Donald Trump would be launching his own head against the side of the building trying to get these guys out. But the fact that they're Caucasian crazy people simply gives them a free pass. I think the government needs to consider that. I get the strategy, and it's not the dumbest thing by itself, but it sets an awful precedent and sends a terrible message to the country that, some people are more equal than others. And, situation where we're already falling victim to Islamophobia, where we're dealing with the issues of Black Lives Matter on a daily basis, a bunch of white guys wrecking federal property, saying crazy statements. It just doesn't square that the federal government leaves them alone.
Josh, you were talking about the response when you got cut off.
Yeah, sorry about that. Well, I'm just saying that given the disasters at Ruby Ridge and Waco, I think that the way that they handled this was clever. And honestly, I feel like their hand was forced. I think they moved more quickly than they were ready because of, the calls from the Oregon state government to crack down and to make something happen. I think the FBI knew that they wanted to have an altercation, and that they were trying to, since, again, it's not as if anyone was in danger, that they decided to act now. And I'm frankly surprised that it was just one person killed so far, and we'll see what happens at the actual refuge once they, try to finally shut this down for good.
I thought it was smart for them to wait until, the leaders left and, you can just cut them off on the road, but they've been leaving frequently. I mean, all these guys have been showing up elsewhere. Eric, why didn't they do this before? Why did they take 25 days?
Well, to answer my question with the departure of Josh, I don't know why they didn't do it sooner. It is strange that they just picked this random date. Maybe, like Josh or Peter was saying, that there was enough pressure for them to do it that they finally needed to act. I think it was the right time to do it because it does kind of break the group apart, show who's going to run. I think, what was the one guy that fled back to his house with his kids? Ritzheimer or whatever.
John Ritzheimer, yeah.
Yeah, so he quickly went home. Like, you can tell which ones were not in it for the, to win. They just kind of took off. And then the ones that are staying, I feel like once the guns start firing, they're going to cower out. I still stand in the camp that besides Lavoy Finicum, the majority of them are not in this when it gets violent. They're just going to back off.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Harney County, where the standoff is taking place, it's roughly the size of Massachusetts. They want the federal government to hand over control of an area the size of Massachusetts to a county government who couldn't possibly have the resources to maintain it. And now we see one person's dead. At least 8 others have to now shell out God knows what for legal fees and are facing prison time. Is this really a cause we're dying for?
No, it's absolutely not, because the idea that the federal government is some boogeyman that's trying to take these people down, it's ridiculous. Number one, I mean, we live in the first world. There's a price for that. You have to pay your taxes to society. That's how it works. And just because these guys have owned a piece of land for over 100 years doesn't give them any more right than anybody else to not pay their taxes. And so I feel like, what the cause that they're fighting for is ridiculous, and they need to just man up, let's make it gender based and pay their taxes.
Well, obviously they're never going to reach us, but what do you think, Josh? It's been 25 days. Looking back, do you think the Bundy militia feels satisfied with what they've accomplished here? Was it worth it?
Well, I mean, the patriarch spoke on that issue today. I read on Latest that he said that the sacrifice was worth making, and that Finicum died for the cause, and so he's definitely been martyred, and this cause has the martyr that they were looking for. I do, absolutely.
With Lavoy, though, early on he made it clear that he wanted to die for it. I mean, is that the same as?
I think that's what makes him their martyr right now.
You think so? I wondered, because it's almost like he was begging for it out of desperation rather than an actual fight took place and, they engaged and he died, let's say, heroically, if you can say that. I don't feel like he did. He kind of rushed at a group of cops and got shot, because that's kind of what happens in America if you charge cops. You die.
Yes. We at Latest.com have proven that time and time again.
At least if you're black, that's the case. Let's just make that distinction.
Well, here's the case. But I don't know. The militia members are charged with 1 count of conspiracy to impede federal officers, which carries 5 years in prison. Peter, do you think there'll be jail time that comes of this?
There may be something. I think there's pressure from a lot of sides to let something happen, but I don't expect to see significant jail time. The federal government has not been proceeding that way at all. We could have a long trial. We could have the infamous open-ended investigation, things like that. But it's very hard to imagine long jail sentences here. It's pretty obvious the federal government just wants this all to go away. They don't really want to deal with this. That said, I mean, it just seems like it wouldn't be the end of the world to have hostage negotiators in there, the way they do when people hole up in banks with hostages when a robbery goes wrong. Get the guy's mom out there reminding him he's got a lot to live for. Cut off the power and water. Don't let them take rides out to 7-Eleven and get mail, for God's sakes. Bring it to an organic conclusion that way. As Eric was saying, and I agree with him, I don't think these guys are ready to die for this. It takes a big decision to say, my life is now going to be over this afternoon. And I have a choice about that, but I choose to end it.
It's almost like they think it's the American Revolution all over again, like they're taking on the British and against the man, but it's not the case. Like, it's just such an isolated incident. It's hard to really get behind it. I could, relate maybe if ISIS was on the ground in the U.S. and it was like a battlefield, but it's not. It's just a couple of guys that wanted their cows to graze on another piece of land.
This is the American ISIS, and I know how that sounds, but because of course they're not beheading civilians or even attacking civilians, but they are the same in the same respect that ISIS is a death cult that wants to go to war with the U.S. government, and so are they. And so again, this was this was giving them what they wanted. When we talk about, the Middle East, we say, should we fight the wars, or should we just kind of leave it alone? And in this one, because they weren't, actually brutal terrorists, we were able to sort of leave it alone. And, I firmly think that because the state government forced the federal government's hand, that is why they moved in, and perhaps even before they were ready to.
I agree. When you should have dismantled this a lot sooner. Sorry, Peter, go ahead.
No, I mean, when you say, let it go easier, I'm sorry, I don't remember your exact phrase. I had a little stroke there. But, I mean, I call that selective law enforcement. We see that all the time in the United States. Two middle-aged white gentlemen are having a discussion, and the police step in and say, guys, let's just break it up. Come on, go home. You've had too much to drink. That happens in two young black males, and oftentimes there's violence, or at least an arrest that goes down under similar circumstances. That's what we're seeing here. Just change the picture. Put some Muslim guys in there, put some African American guys in there, whatever. I mean, the police have done far worse things to nuclear protesters who simply want to sit and block roads on federal land so that trucks can't pass and things like that. This, to me, strikes of. But
none of them were armed.
Yeah, well, that does that make it better that these guys are armed? I mean, to me, that makes it actually much worse than arresting nuns for sitting down on a road.
Well, it's just that if you arrest nuns, they're not going to shoot you. But if they tried to, roll up the driveway the day that they took over the refuge, they would have opened fire. It's fucked up that it proves that guns do change the sort of level of discourse.
You really think they would have engaged in a violent conflict, though?
100%, yeah. No question. I mean, I kind of think, huh? Now, I mean, the people, I mean, there were those people in the video that was just put up on the site where the guy's talking about calling people to come and says, kill law enforcement if they stop you.
The FBI tries to kill him.
And if his voice wins out amongst the 6 or 8 people still there, they'll go out, in a blaze of glory. It'll be it'll be their Alamo moment in their twisted, bizarro patriot mindset.
Well, how do you think that the FBI will handle the remaining occupiers there, Josh?
My hope is that they they have it blocked off now. And so with supplies and water and stuff not getting in, and there being less people, I think eventually they'll hope they surrender.
Remember, they do have 50 pounds of gummy dildos to eat, so that'll last quite a while.
That's absolutely true. And I mean, here's the thing. They're surprisingly warm. I'm not going to tell you how I know gummy dildos hold heat, but they do.
All right. Well, there is an election going on right now, and the Iowa caucus is just days away. New Hampshire's not far behind. Republican frontrunner Donald Trump yesterday announced that he's not coming to Thursday's Fox News debate because Megyn Kelly's going to be there. So I know that Trump has had this little thing with Kelly ever since she asked him about all the horrible shit he said about women. But, Peter, do you think that's the main reason that he's not showing up?
I don't understand it. I would do a lot of things to spend an evening with Megyn Kelly. So, I mean, I just have to ask some serious questions about Donald Trump at this point. Trump is a magician at drawing attention to himself. I mean, the guy is fantastic at this. He gets so much publicity by announcing he's not going to show up somewhere. Typically, that's the kind of person you say, all right, well, good luck to you. Have a nice life. He's managed to take this thing with Megyn Kelly and build it into kind of a professional wrestling thing, where the good wrestler and the bad wrestler whip up this fake frenzy to bring a crowd out. The chances of Trump showing up are extraordinarily good.
Yeah, I agree.
And he's going to be on television announcing something about why he won't be at the debate, and he's going to milk this thing for another 24 hours worth of news cycle. In fact, I may be wrong, but didn't he threaten not to show up for a previous debate at some point?
Three times to boycott debates.
Yeah. So, like so many other things, his credibility on this issue is suspect.
Josh, do you think that he will or won't show up to Thursday night's debate? He seems very adamant this time, and he's very much insisting that he will not.
Here's the thing. I have no idea, because it's Trump, and how could anyone know? I do think, though, that what's behind it is not so much about Megyn Kelly, although, again, no politician has ever lost votes for saying that the media is out to get him and that they're corrupt and biased. Even if it's the home club, the home field advantage network. But I do think that that what's behind this is that Rand Paul got an amazing amount of publicity when he announced that he was going to skip just the undercard debate. I mean, audiences skipped the undercard debate. So I really, and then he ended up getting on every show. He did a live chat, live stream thing during the debate where he was taking questions from viewers, and it did pretty well.
AMA too.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that what he's trying to do is just, further that narrative that he's putting politics on its head and doesn't play ball with the people who want to play ball. Like, he's trying to make himself seem like the outsider still, even though the GOP establishment basically in the past 2 weeks has been, what the fuck ever, you're our nominee, fine.
Yeah,
so I don't know.
Transition.
I think it speaks to the point you made a few podcasts ago, Igor, that Ted Cruz way scarier than Donald Trump to people who pay attention.
There's a very large consensus in Washington and across the country that Ted Cruz is in fact the worst. So I don't know. What do you think?
He's Canadian,
what do you think
so
Trump? Well, exactly. That's another reason. Peter, what do you think he has to gain by with all this? I mean, outside of the publicity, which they were going to give him anyway.
Well, there's two things. I mean, you can't discount the publicity. I mean, especially if you're Donald Trump, and at least some significant portion of his motivation is simply ego. The other thing, though, is the old adage that when you're ahead, there's nothing to gain in a debate. You can only kind of break even or in fact lose. I don't think Trump is that considerate and that well thought out, but the argument is always there. Just let the other guys beat each other up. Let everyone take shots at Ted Cruz, and Trump just sits by the sideline and lets it go. Not to take us off track, but I mean, interestingly, Hillary is trying to whip up frenzy over some unofficial debate ahead of the New Hampshire things that Bernie Sanders is suggesting he's not going to attend. So the logic is in there about don't show up if you're ahead.
We'll talk about that in a second. But, okay, Eric, let's say Trump does no-show the debate. Do you think that the ratings will be significantly low, and do you think that itself could hurt some of these candidates?
I think the ratings will be lower because most people in the current election
he's the main attraction
in for Trumpomania. He is, no, absolutely. I mean, it's Trumpomania, and people tune in because they want to see what kind of crazy shit he's going to say. They want to see who he's going to target next. I mean, obviously, if he was at that debate with Cruz in the prior ones, when Carson was a legitimate candidate, he was the one that he was making fun of. It's the Trump show. What he says is great, not necessarily for the country, but, for TV ratings.
Well, one reason I think that he might actually follow through with it is because he's apparently scheduled an event to raise money for the Wounded Warriors Project. And Josh, do you think that could be like a smart move on his part, or do you think that ultimately this could backfire if he does go through with it?
I mean, no, I think if he does actually host a fundraiser for wounded vets, that'll be great, because again, that's what politicians sort of have to do. And I mean, in this campaign cycle, especially, vets aren't even getting lip service. I mean, that makes sense because for Democrats, the VA scandal was embarrassing. Bernie Sanders was on the House Armed Services Committee, did nothing about the VA until he absolutely had to. And they don't want to talk about wounded warriors on the Republican side because all they want to talk about is more war. So if you remind people that, this fucks up the kids that go fight these wars, that sort of hurts the message. So, and I'm sure it's going to be that odd vets group that none of the vets groups that I belong to or, follow have ever heard of. So it's going to be very much like
when he had that event on the ship. Wasn't that like a group of 2 people, really? I forget
yes.
the group, but he had a
yes.
veteran sponsor.
And he did this before. I forget which. I think it was the CNN debate when he asked for. He said he needed to be paid to go to the debate to some vets thing. So, and again, here's the thing: if he does this vets event, and the networks cover it live while the debate's going on, yeah, it might actually hurt the ratings. And I mean, here's the thing. I would want to turn it on, too, just to see what kind of crazy circus it is. But I don't think it'll ultimately – I think the debate will still win just because people are going to tune in to see what the other ones say about Trump and about him not being there. And that's, of course, if he doesn't show, which I imagine an 11th hour thing will come out where Roger Ailes will call him, and then he'll be able to say, I made a deal with Roger Ailes, and we negotiated it. And now I'm on the debate. So,
quick question: who's been excluded from this one? Has there been anybody?
Nobody. In fact, Jim Gilmore's in.
Stage.
Okay.
No, he's on the main stage.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He's back on the main stage.
Yeah. But I think this is the first debate that Jim Gilmore's in, and I mean, I don't know if you guys even know that he's running, but he is. He's. I don't even remember what he was a former governor of either. I think Virginia. But I'm not sure.
Yeah, he ran for president once before. It was also said that. We'll talk about Bloomberg. But Peter mentioned that the NBC is trying to set up an unsanctioned rebel debate next week in the New Hampshire primaries. Otherwise, the schedule for the first time ever wouldn't have a debate right before New Hampshire. So the DNC's come out against it. Bernie Sanders has been reluctant. And so far, he's just saying, I don't want to break DNC rules. But Hillary's saying, let's do it. So do you think Bernie's resisting because he knows he's not as good a debater as her, or is it just because he has a double-digit lead in New Hampshire and there's nothing to be gained, like Peter said?
You're asking me that?
Eric, since you're the one talking.
Okay. I talk a lot. But no, I absolutely think that's why he would want to omit it, because he has performed usually a little more poorly than Hillary Clinton in debates. She's good at kind of pinpointing him on things, and even though he can counter it sometimes, he has so much more to lose in New Hampshire, where he is absolutely decimating Hillary Clinton. And because Iowa is just a little bit before that, he wants to kind of make sure that momentum is safeguarded if he can somehow, score a victory in Iowa. He doesn't want to damage his chances in New Hampshire at all.
Josh, Peter said that you can't really gain anything in debates, you can only lose. Do you think that's why Sanders has been reluctant? And from other reports, he's been reluctant all along to add any more debates.
It's funny, though, because I seem to remember his surrogates talking quite a bit about the DNC only scheduling 6 debates. Martin O'Malley really pushed it because he needed the attention, but when Sanders was still down in the polling in the teens and the 20s, he was all for more debates, too. So I think Peter's absolutely right that because he's on top now and because Hillary Clinton is so good on a debate stage, then that's why he's probably avoiding this. But what's interesting though is I remember distinctly when, after Obama won the Iowa caucus, how the tone of the campaign shifted and how he started attacking Hillary harder and she started attacking him. And what I think will be interesting is that if Bernie is able to maintain this sort of polite campaign and not attacking Clinton, and more just attacking her record and policies and such. I don't know how that'll play. The people who love him will say, oh, look at what a gentleman, look at how much honor he has. But Hillary Clinton, she will hit him hard. And if he doesn't answer, I don't know. So I think that he's absolutely trying to keep the only one talking at events featuring him to be him. He doesn't, I think he wants to just keep doing what he was doing and hopefully take the first 2 contests before he probably will lose South Carolina.
Another thing I was thinking of too is that he actually had issues with the DNC in the past where I think he tapped into Clinton's database or something. Mm-hmm. He may be trying to stay in good graces with them too, because if he was to sign off for that debate, then it could fall into their bad books again.
So do you guys think that the debate won't happen then? Josh?
Well, because, first of all, Sanders has not always gotten what appears to be the best advice from his team. Before the last Democratic debate, he released some changes in his healthcare policy just before the debate, and Hillary just went nuts with that and used it against him. So he may still have a young team that is learning their way around this. I mean, if Hillary and Martin O'Malley say we're going to join this debate, it's going to look very awkward with an empty chair on stage, and Bernie may reluctantly have to step in. What he probably should be doing. Pardon?
Do you think the debate will get the viewership that the other one gets?
It'll get
NBC.
Yeah, it'll get some. But I think what if Bernie were to ask me, what I would do is advise him of two things. First, control the format. Do something similar to the town hall, which plays to his strengths, where he's addressing the voters one-on-one, not up there trying to shout down Hillary Clinton, and help control the format. The second would be to agree to this New Hampshire thing, as long as Hillary agrees to an extra debate right before Super Tuesday, and throw it right back on her, because there's no way she wants to do that. And if she says, no, we're not going to do it, well, he's got all the tools he needs to negate not showing up in New Hampshire, if that's what he wants to do. And NBC, this is just an event, a TV show for them. They have lots of room to negotiate and set this thing up any way that the candidates will agree to. So I hope Sanders gets the right advice on this, and does it in a way that, plays to his strengths and doesn't hand something to Hillary that she can just beat him up with.
Well, on Monday, Iowa's going to go vote, and, we've seen a few polls say it's Bernie by a couple points. We've seen a couple polls say it's Hillary by a couple points. Either way, it's a very close race. It's going to come down to turnout. We talked about it a couple of times. Hillary has her well-oiled machine on the ground, and Bernie has the momentum, the kids, the people who wouldn't ordinarily vote. There was actually a poll the other day that was released. I think 70% of first-time caucus goers will vote for Bernie. So, with that said, Josh, who do you think wins the turnout battle on the ground?
Well, I think it's what you pointed out, that if Hillary's machine and her experience is better than Bernie's sort of grassroots movement that he likes to paint it as, then it will be a very close race, and she could come out ahead. But if Bernie's team is, aware of what they're doing and perhaps as good as the people who were working for, say, Obama in 2008, I think he could squeak by. But here's the thing about Iowa. They do tend to do stuff completely differently than the polls. Now, I don't think that means that, O'Malley's going to come in second or something, but I do think that anyone who says they know who's going to win Iowa is lying to you.
The O'Malley thing is very interesting because, of course, Iowa has this bizarre caucus system. They don't actually vote per se. And one of the key factors is that within an individual caucus group, where everyone basically gets together and talks through, what their support is, they have this arcane rule and I believe it's if you get less than 15% within your caucus, your votes are thrown back into the pool. So it's very possible that lots of O'Malley supporters are going to end up being cut loose and told you've got to pick either Bernie or Hillary. There's not enough of you here to put in a whatever they call it, a caucus vote for Martin O'Malley.
Quorum? Is it quorum?
Quorum. I'm not sure anyone in Iowa understands all the rules, but the point being that if too few people show up in some group supporting O'Malley, they don't get to support O'Malley. They have to get one of the other candidates. And I think, and see if you guys agree, I think overall an O'Malley supporter will probably vote Hillary if the choice is simply Hillary or Bernie. What do you guys think?
I'd say that any supporters of Martin O'Malley's who were with him for his, because he's been, and especially because of his record in Baltimore, he immediately jumped onto Black Lives Matter and embraced it. And so I think that whichever candidate is better viewed on that issue will probably pull a lot of his support. But
Sanders is better geared for that topic.
Yeah, I mean, because O'Malley is kind of a lefty. Like, he's pretty left. So that's a tough one.
I think the O'Malley
they might just leave. They might just not vote.
That's true. Well, I think the O'Malley supporters are the ones looking for an alternative, and they didn't find it in Bernie, and they look for an alternative to the alternative. So that's why I think Peter might be right. They might be more likely to go towards Hillary because Bernie doesn't seem like their guy. But I think it'd be split pretty evenly. So, they say predictions are for suckers, and with that said, Peter, who do you think wins in Iowa and by how much?
Well, thanks for calling me first with that one, Igor. I'm gonna go Bernie, but very, very close. You cannot discount the Hillary organization. The Clintons have been running campaigns nearly continuously, since the 80s. And they have got it down. They've got the money, they've got the computers, they've got the data models, and they can turn out staff. That's worth points right there. So even though she probably is behind in some kind of polling situation, she's got a weapon that'll buy her a couple of points just for showing up. That said, Bernie is really touching something out there in America right now, and so I'm going to give him Iowa, but it's going to be very, very close.
Josh, who wins by how much?
I think Bernie wins Iowa by a hair, and I think he does much better in New Hampshire, but then I think Clinton clobbers him in South Carolina.
Eric?
For me, as much as it pains me to say, I think Clinton will win very narrowly because I think Sanders is going to kind of drop the ball on this fake debate. And it's going to hurt him a little bit in the polls.
I think I agree with Eric, actually. But, all right, well, there's about 8 days between the Iowa caucus and the New Hampshire primary, and if Hillary does win Iowa, do you think that can help her stage an upset in New Hampshire, or no, Eric?
No, I think New Hampshire is Bernie's to win because he is crushing it there, and it's very close to his home state where he serves. So I think he'll win New Hampshire handily.
Well, on the other side, we have Donald Trump has a narrow lead over Ted Cruz right now. Cruz has been slipping a bit. Eric, who do you think wins there and by how much?
I think Trump wins. It's the whole facade. He's just going to kind of clean up all the primaries for the most part.
Josh?
Yeah, I think that Trump will definitely take Iowa. Just because there's nothing that has stopped him yet. I mean, everything he does, it confuses everyone, but they love him for it, So I think he takes I think he takes Iowa easily. I think the bigger thing will be who comes in second. Like, how does Marco Rubio do? Rand Paul's talked about he has like 1,000 some precinct captains. I mean, if Rand Paul's able to squeak in third in Iowa, I mean, he might all of a sudden supplant Rubio as the like non-crazy alternative. Which is ironic because, again, Rand Paul, he's kind of libertarian and they're all a little crazy. So, yeah, I think it'll be Trump.
In the mirror and sees that hair and thinks I look good is a little crazy.
It's true.
It's a bad year for hair in the elections. I mean, between Bernie and Trump and Rand, I mean, we're really...
Too. Don't kid yourself. Her hair's pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, sexist, Eric.
Sexist.
Would you talk about man candidates' hair?
No, I'm bringing you. None of you mentioned a women hair. Bring it into the mix. Keep it balanced.
And Josh does the hair close up. Fine, I get to do it too.
Yes.
Look, the thing about Trump is that the laws of gravity don't apply to him. I mean, the kind of things that can happen to a candidate at the last minute, where they say something stupid or some piece of information about them, is leaked by an opponent at the last minute. Those things don't seem to apply to Trump.
He's already said them.
Yeah, that's my point. I mean, Cruz can stumble on something, whatever. Trump, it doesn't matter. So I think you guys are
They literally have video of Trump saying, "I'm totally cool with abortion," and it does nothing. It does nothing.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with Trump and the goat, I mean, if that didn't break YouTube, what will? But the
daughter thing. What he said about his daughter. Like, if she wasn't my daughter, I'd probably be dating her.
Sure, I was making something up about bestiality, but you make the point that, sure, he went out in favor of incest. I mean, but that said, I think you guys have touched on the key issue for the Republicans in Iowa, which is who survives. Because if somebody gets pick one, Jeb Bush gets whacked hard in Iowa and then goes to New Hampshire and gets whacked hard again, I mean, it's really hard for that guy to keep dragging this whole thing forward. So I think we'll see a lot of thinning out of the Republican herd.
But Jeb has the money to stick into probably Super Tuesday.
Maybe, yeah, but I mean,
somewhat. But your guys like your Santorums, your Huckabees, I think we're having our last undercard debate on Thursday. This is the last one.
They're already gone. I mean, Huckabee is making Adele parody videos now.
Chopping baked beans.
If we don't have it as a featured item on Latest.com, people can Google Huckabee and Adele. I mean, it's just horrible. It's
not on Latest yet. It will be when this is over. I promise you.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, it's like something kids do for fun, where they lip sync to Adele. So I mean, Huckabee and those people. I mean, you say names like Santorum. I mean, I follow politics. I still have to stop for a second. Wait, Santorum. Oh yeah, that guy. Yeah, they're done. They're cooked. I think we're looking at whether Jeb Bush goes forward, whether Rubio seems further. Pardon?
I think
Carson.
He's done.
Yeah, I mean, that guy's pretty much history at this point. Nobody's even heard from him.
The pyramids are ancient grain silos, so we'll just let him have that one.
Yeah, we'll just let him work that issue on the sidelines.
The Chinese in Syria, that was my favorite.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
Well,
can I tell a story about the Chinese in Iraq?
What?
A quick story about the Chinese in Iraq.
Okay.
This was during my time in Iraq. One of the things I did was these building projects, and we were supposed to go out and look at a water plant, so that we could help destroy it or something. And so we roll up in the middle of nowhere to this water plant, and then there's these two Chinese engineers that are already there for some reason. Where do they come from? How the hell did they get there? Nobody knows. And so I speak, a dozen words of Chinese. And so I went up and said, ni hao, ni hao, and these guys literally shit themselves. I'm sure they were on the phone to their spy masters in Beijing the next night saying, the Americans are onto us. So if there are any Chinese in Syria, I'm prepared to be summoned by our government to take care of that.
And deal with it like you did before.
You actually met the Chinese that might be in Syria right now, according to Ben Carson. So, okay, well, New Hampshire is going to hold its first primary since the state adopted voter ID laws. Josh, how are these laws going to affect New Hampshire and the other states in these races?
Well, the weird thing about the New Hampshire voter ID law is that it is whereas Arizona and some others are going the legal route to be struck down as unconstitutional, they actually compromised on it and made it so that if you come without an ID, you can fill out an affidavit and have your photo taken and still vote. So I think that the biggest impact on New Hampshire will be lines. It'll be like people will be, if they're filling out affidavits, taking pictures, it's going to take longer to vote. And, some people will, they're voting on their lunch break or whatever. So that may impact turnout that way. There's bound to be lawsuits if people are turned away, or even from campaigns. If a particular district that was good for a campaign, they think something's going to go on, they'll sue just because. I don't know how it'll affect, but I think it will. I mean, people will feel it. I don't know if it'll result in turnout, lower turnout, higher turnout. But the one thing that is definitely clear about this voter ID law and every other voter ID law It has nothing to do with in-person voter fraud and everything to do with people in power making it more difficult for people to vote, because when people can vote more easily, the less of a firm grasp they have on their power.
Keep in mind that New Hampshire may not be the most salient test of this, because these voter ID laws tend to impact harder on people of color, people of lower economic ranks, people who may not have a reason, seniors maybe, who don't have a reason to have government-issued photo ID. I don't think that those groups, seniors accepted, but many of them have residual IDs, for when they weren't blind, could pass a driver's test. And so I think, New Hampshire isn't a state where minority or low-income votes are as big a thing as maybe South Carolina, for example, where those voting blocks are very important. And states like where those states are, I think the voter ID things are going to hit a lot harder and bring forward a lot more lawsuits. That said, if you lose, you're going to turn around and look for every advantage you can. And in America, that means suing someone. So, yeah, we'll see those lawsuits.
Well, as these laws are being passed, there was a lot of concern that this is another Republican, attempt to steal the election away by focusing another law on these specific types of voters. Peter, do you anticipate that this will have a significant impact, or do you think that are there other ways that maybe we're missing that the Republicans are trying to steal elections this time around?
Well, they're getting the playbook done, and it's basically you start with things like voter ID laws, and that trims off a portion of the population, and then you do gerrymandering so that you dilute the votes of people that your opponent is going to do, or you concentrate them in a way that is advantageous to you. You try to manipulate things. You try to get polling places that aren't on bus routes, so that it's harder for people to get there. You try to get the hours compressed. I mean, there's a whole list of tricks that the Republicans have employed, and with some success. So I suspect they'll have come up with something new and even more clever this time around. But absolutely, voter suppression is an issue in our country, and it certainly will be an issue in many of the races, in the primaries, and, of course, the general election in particular.
Josh, how big an issue do you think voter suppression will be this time around?
I think it could be pretty big. Here's the thing with the Republicans and not knowing about who their candidate's going to be or anything like that. It's starting to look increasingly, though, like it's going to be Donald Trump. And what's interesting about that is even though his support might not be capped yet, he will start out as the nominee in sort of a general election hole that Republican nominees aren't used to having. Like, for example, Mitt Romney, the base was tepid about him, but general election, he was the most palatable of the choices to that voting bloc. So if you get someone like Trump or Cruz, or even if Rubio wins but has to go super fringy to excite the base enough to get the votes.
I'm starting to think Rubio's a pipe dream at this point, though.
I think so. I think so too. Like he the time for him to do something, it was now, or a week or two ago.
Jeb Bush has, but he has completely stalled for months and nowhere to go.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. And that's why I think the establishment people have finally stopped letting go of that dream of their own, Hispanic Obama and just signing up with Trump and hoping that they get to stay on the compound with Trump while the rest of the country burns. But I don't know. I think that especially if it looks like the nominee of the Democratic Party, whether it's Sanders or Clinton, is creaming Trump, especially amongst, or whoever the GOP nominee is, amongst the demographics most affected by this, say older blue-collar workers, retired folks, students, and lower-income ethnic and racial minorities, they will use voter ID. They will use every trick they have to try and keep that turnout as low as possible.
All right, one more election thing, and I hate this one because it involves Mike Bloomberg, who is just the worst. Since last week, the rumors have been swirling that the billionaire is considering a third-party run for president, a rumor that we hear pretty much every election cycle. Josh, do you think there's any validity to it this year?
Well, since the last guy that was doing it was Trump, I'm very gun shy. I don't know. I absolutely think that if Sanders is the nominee, it's way more likely that Bloomberg is going to do this. And again, I've heard people saying that he won't run if Hillary's the nominee, but I've not seen that confirmed from him or any of his people. So I don't know if that's really true or just speculation. But I almost wonder if he will be able to pull it off, and even in a way that like Nader, where it would hurt the Democrats significantly or the Republicans, because he sucks. I mean, like, as you said, you couldn't help yourself living in New York saying how bad he is. I mean, he's the guy that did the soda thing. You couldn't get the big soda. So I can't see him. At least Ross Perot was funny.
At one point, Mike Bloomberg tried to ban Mr. Softy trucks from playing the music and called it noise pollution. That's the kind of person Mike Bloomberg is.
Right.
Bloomberg is not going to run as an independent because people who run as independents get their asses handed to them, and there's no point of Mike Bloomberg getting that. What Bloomberg is doing is saying, I'm here and I'm prepared, and if you on the Republican side implode for any reason, or if there's a last minute some kind of maneuvering where the Republican base and the Republican establishment just says there's no way we're going to get behind Donald Trump. Bloomberg is saying, I'm here, I'm ready, I'm waiting. If you guys need me, I'm going to step in. It's the kind of things you hear about Biden if something were to put Hillary out of the race, some kind of email indictment, a heart attack. I mean, anything that pulled her out of the race and put Sanders I'm serious. Put Sanders as the nominee. It's, the Democratic establishment is going to say, no, we can't do this. We can't put Bernie Sanders out there. And they're going to find a way to draft an establishment candidate. Biden in the wings, Bloomberg in the wings, who knows who else. I mean, that we talked about Rubio, but I mean, that's been one of his sort of strategies all through this, was to stand in the back of the room and say, if you guys ever wanted a non-crazy candidate, I'm just over here.
The Romney gambit is what that's called.
That's a good question.
No, exactly. So, no, Bloomberg isn't going to be an independent, but he could be a factor. And he could, be nosing around the convention, for example, see if there's going to be a draft, whatever. Yeah.
Well, what I was wondering is if it'll turn into a pissing match between Trump and Bloomberg. Do they have a rivalry where, it's just a battle of the billionaires kind of fucking with each other to see who can win it?
No, Bloomberg is actually much, much richer than him.
No, he is. Yeah. I just checked. It's something like $39 million to $4 billion net worth. So it's a substantial difference. But, I'm wondering if it could be something like that, too, where Bloomberg just kind of wants to shit on Trump and try to dash his chances. I don't think Bloomberg could win because independents never win. We suffered through Ralph Nader for how many years trying? So.
Well, maybe not an independent like Bloomberg, but Josh, do you think that maybe even like a Rubio or a Biden could jump in as a third party in case it is a Sanders-Trump?
I don't. Here's the thing. I don't think it would get to that. I think the conventions are probably going to be the most interesting conventions of our lifetime, just because. I mean, Hillary Clinton already has locked up a bunch. What was it, like a third of the superdelegates or something? And that was in the summer that story came out. So, I mean, there is conceivably a way in which Bernie Sanders could end up with the most delegates from the primaries, but Hillary Clinton still has more delegates than he does because of superdelegates and things like that. And a brokered convention would just be a disaster for either party. And I think that, I think the conventions are where the magic's going to happen. So, I mean, if any third-party person or a surprise candidate like draft Biden or maybe, they dig up Ronald Reagan and nominate his corpse for his bones for office. I don't know. But I definitely think that the conventions are going to be where the parties have out these differences if the voters don't do what they think they're going to do.
I mean, you can imagine Trump sort of, if for some reason it got to the convention and he was, not going to be the nominee. You can imagine Trump just sort of saying, "Yeah, whatever. You guys have a good election. Fuck it." But it's very difficult to imagine the Bernie Sanders people, just quietly, saying, "Well, congratulations, Hillary. We look forward to supporting you in the general election." No way. I mean, these are people who are emotionally invested in this candidate. And if they go to the convention with delegates to deal, that should be very interesting. I think it'll be the first set of conventions that may be worth watching.
Well, I wrote about it earlier this week, and Josh, you saw it also. There was a poll on Drudge Report, and I mean, obviously it's unscientific, but it did have 1 million some odd votes, and second to Donald Trump by only like a handful of percentages was Bernie Sanders. He beat Ted Cruz among this conservative crowd. He beat Marco Rubio. Obviously, he beat, Hillary finished with like less than Jeb Bush did. And these people really hate Jeb Bush. Do you think that Bernie Sanders could, what Peter said, maybe wedge in there as a third party? This is obviously his last chance to run.
Right. Yeah. I don't see him doing the third party thing. Because if he was doing the third party thing, he would attack Hillary and, do everything but call her the C word on the stage before he would run a third party, an independent run for the White House. Because, again, if he couldn't win the Democratic nomination, how's he going to beat Trump, the Democrats and the Republicans? But I do think that what that poll shows is one of two things. Either Bernie Sanders and his people online are amazing and can change, because if Bernie Sanders were if the hashtag Feel the Berm was like, hey, let's vote in this Drudge poll and fuck up their results, that's pretty impressive online mobilization, and that's nothing to shake a stick at. But if it's genuinely conservative people who like Bernie Sanders, it might be the people who just, are mad at Wall Street or are not fans of Hillary Clinton. Like, they hate Hillary Clinton so much they voted for Bernie Sanders. I mean, I don't know.
There's a scary amount of overlap on some issues, particularly the economic issues, between Trump and Sanders. I mean, there's nothing where they touch common ground on social issues. But Bernie is against, the campaign, the undemocratic campaign contributions. Bernie is against these trade agreements, NAFTA and the TPP. Both Bernie and Trump support some regulation or some price control on pharmaceuticals. I mean, they do these for very different reasons and very different justifications. But at the end of the day, if you were a Republican voter who wasn't focused on social issues and, you just weren't going to vote for Hillary Clinton and you weren't going to vote for Donald Trump, there's parts of Bernie's message that actually resonate.
All right. Well, we're going to see how Iowa turns out. We're going to keep an eye on the Republican debate on Trump Watch. And join us next week for Latest.com show. Keep reading Latest.com.